You know, I've stood in rooms so silent you can hear the hum of the universe. After all the applause, after all the noise, that's the sound that stays with you. The hum of what's possible, and the echo of everything you almost lost to get there. People see the success, the rockets, the headlines. They don't see the man in a garage surrounded by cardboard boxes, wondering if he'd just made the single biggest mistake of his life. I remember being a boy in Houston, spending my summers on my grandfather's ranch. He was a cowboy, a real one. He taught me how to fix things, how to be self-reliant. But more than that, he let me be curious. I'd take apart his old tractor with a wrench, just to see how it worked. He never got angry. He'd just watch, and sometimes he'd say, "Jeff, you can't fix it if you're afraid to break it first." I didn't know it then, but that was the seed. For a long time, I played it safe. A good job on Wall Street, a clear path. But that curiosity, it was like a quiet hum in the back of my mind, louder and louder. I'd read about this thing, the internet. Its growth was astronomical, 1,000% in a year. I couldn't look away. And I remember this one moment, perfectly clear. I was on a long drive, cross-country, and I started drafting a business plan in my head. Not for a company, for a regret minimization framework. Sounds like jargon, I know, but for me, it was everything. I pictured myself at 80 looking back. I knew I wouldn't regret trying and failing. Not really, but I would regret never trying. That thought, it was a physical weight, lifted. So I walked away from that safe, comfortable life. People thought I was crazy. My parents were concerned. I told them I was going to drive across the country and start a company selling books on the internet. On the internet. The silence on the other end of that phone call was heavier than any garage door I'd ever lift. And those first days in the garage, God, the sound of the dot matrix printer, the bell we'd rigged to ring every time we made a sale. We'd all get so excited. We'd huddle around the computer. Did it ring again? It was magical. For the first few weeks. Then the reality set in. We packed those first books on our hands and knees, on a concrete floor. I'd drive them to the post office myself, in my old Chevy Blazer. We were teachers, computer scientists, and me, playing at being a logistics company. We were making it up as we went along. And for every one sale, there were 1,000 problems. A server crashing in the middle of the night. A customer who couldn't get their book. The doubt. It was a constant companion. I remember one night, late. I was alone in the warehouse, just stacks and stacks of unsold books, and the bell hadn't rung in hours. I sat there on a packing crate and I put my head in my hands. The question wasn't, will this work? The question was, am I leading all these people who believed in me off a cliff? But you have to understand, I couldn't give up. It wasn't about being stubborn. It was about the vision. I could see it. I could see a place where you could find anything. A place that put the customer, not the competitor, at the very center of every decision. That belief, it was the only thing that burned brighter than the fear. We survived those early years, just barely. And then we started to grow, really grow. And with growth came a different kind of pain. The dot-com bubble burst. Everyone said we were next. The headlines. They wrote our obituary. Amazon.toast. I had to look my team in the eye and tell them to ignore the noise, to keep building, to have faith in the long, long term. When the whole world is telling you you're wrong, your own voice can get very, very small. But that's the secret, I think, It's not about being the smartest person in the room. It's about being the most stubborn about your core principles. Customer obsession. That's not a slogan. It's a religion. It's the compass that points true north when every other signpost is gone. We launched Kindle, AWS. Things people said were distractions, but they weren't. They were just new expressions of that same old curiosity. That same boy with a wrench, taking apart the world to see how it could work better. And then one day, you look up, and the garage is a memory. The bell is in a museum, and you're responsible for something so much bigger than yourself. It's lonely at the top. They never tell you that. The weight of all those dreams, all those paychecks, all those families. It rests on a handful of decisions. You have to be willing to be misunderstood for long periods of time. You have to be willing to break a few things, including your own heart. So if you take anything from my story, let it be this. Don't quiet the hum, that quiet, persistent curiosity in the back of your mind. That's not a distraction. That's your purpose calling. The world will try to make you practical. It will try to silence that hum with the promise of security. But the biggest risk isn't failure. The biggest risk is a life of quiet resignation. A life of, what if? Look back from the end of your life. What will you regret more? The stumble or the step you never took? Build your own framework. Not for success, but for a life with no regrets. And then, start packing boxes in your own garage. However that looks for you. Because the universe isn't just humming for me, it's humming for you too. You just have to be brave enough to listen.